WBME presents Racine and Me, a weekly look at the events and issues for Racine. Now, here is your host from CBS 58 News, Mike Stralo.
Good morning, everyone. Our guest is working to make Racine a better place to live for people of all ages and races. He is a survivor of a broken family, mean streets, and prison. Today, this former gang member is the coordinator for the Safe Streets Outreach Program in Racine. Please welcome Sammy Rangel. Sammy, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get into your background, what you're doing today to help especially young people, let's talk about some current events. Specifically, there's been a lot going on in the city of Racine for the past couple of weeks. The mayor just this past week announced his resignation after an internet sex sting. What is the mood in your community right now, given what's happened?
I think there's a lot of disbelief and some sadness there, but I think the city has decided that we're going to continue to move forward positively. We're not going to miss a beat. People are already stepping up to fill the spaces that need to be filled, and you kind of hear an air of confidence that we can move beyond this.
In his 2008 State of the City address, former Mayor Gary Becker said, quote, "The council and I are in this together. We are working together to move Racine ahead." Again, you still feel that that is what's happening in Racine. The former mayor was a big supporter of the program in which you are now a coordinator.
Certainly, you know, and the work that's been done is going to continue to be done. You know, it's these things happen. That's why there are programs like mine out there. So, you know, once we recover from the shock of it, I think we just decide it's time to keep moving forward. People still need help and service work, and we're not going to let that be stopped by anybody.
As the city of Racine searches for new leadership, in the mayor's office, the country is embracing new leadership in the White House. Did you have a chance to see the inauguration of President Barack Obama?
We watched some of that. We recorded it, so we'll be able to watch it as a family in full. But with our busy lives, that's kind of difficult. But the parts that we did watch was awe, respect. I felt motivated. I looked at my children and felt that maybe there is some brighter futures for them waiting for them. Very hopeful that this president will lead us in a new direction. And I think overall it's just a testimony of how personal people can make real decisions to move beyond limitations that have been set by others.
When you were a child, the country was quite different. There was a lot of civil strife. There was, you know, war and so forth. And yet, as you're saying, the young people today, you see a brighter future for them moving ahead.
Certainly, you know, I think you know, even in my life, I have not felt very meaningful when it comes to government. But this particular presidential election with Obama has really shown me that, you know, my voice does count, and which means that my children's voice has just gotten a little stronger. And so that's what makes me hopeful for them, you know, that if we could do it this time and bring some change with our vote, that our children will actually be able to carry that torch forward for us.
When you were a child, you didn't believe your voice counted. You were quite often frightened to speak up. Let's go back to your childhood. Where were you born and under what circumstances, Sammy?
Well, I was born in Lubbock, Texas. We came to Illinois when my mother's brother was killed. And, you know, we were so poor we couldn't afford to drive back, so we ended up making Illinois home. The circumstances I remember, you know, we were very isolated. There was a lot of poverty. You know, a lot of times we were eating gravy and bread, gravy and tortillas for dinner, breakfast. But I just constantly remember being abused by my mom. You know, there was a lot of, it seemed like she, in a sense, hated me, you know, for whatever. I knew it couldn't have been me, but it was always directed at me. And so my voice didn't count. It wasn't that I believed it didn't count. When I would tell people what was going on, it was as if I hadn't said anything. Nothing changed. In fact, sometimes things got worse. So you kind of learn to keep your voice to yourself. You learn to box yourself up in a sense and not trust or share anything with anyone, because it always gets back to mom. And then when they leave, you know, mom has to take that out on you because you've broken the family silence. You know, you should honor that, although you didn't maybe honor your own children.
At what age did you leave home?
I left home for the first time at 11.
11 years old.
11 years old. It was really close to my birthday. It was kind of ironic because I came home for my birthday, and when I walked in, you know, I knew things were always rough. I typically didn't get much for Christmas or holidays, but at least on occasion my mom would make me a cake. So I was at least looking forward to that. But instead I walked in and my mom started hitting me right away, and it turns out they found out my sister was pregnant, and I knew about it and didn't say anything. So I always say, it's kind of funny now, I always say that I'm the one that got whooped when my sister got pregnant, you know, and
Right.
you know, because it was kind of like my fault somehow that I didn't speak up on it. But at that point, I just kind of lost all hope, and I started to feel intuitively that I was close to being killed. The abuse was that serious, the neglect, being starved. You know, something in me told me that if I didn't choose to put myself first, that I would probably be dead soon.
You were just trying to survive. You started associating with some gangs. You got into trouble with the law. At what point in your life did you actually get so deep into trouble that you were forced to go to prison?
Well, that first year when I left, it was summertime, and by the end of the summer, I was sexually active. I was drinking, I was smoking cocaine, you know, all at 11. I went from never being out of the house, literally, to just running the streets wildly. And I paired up with some people that were a lot more advanced than I was with, you know, that kind of stuff. And so I was trying to compete with them and fit in and doing my best to survive. You know, I was still homeless and, you know, eating and stealing to eat. That's when I started really getting into crime, was, you know, to feed myself, clothe myself, and also just to have some, you know, some money for the drugs, to share so that I could have a place to stay, like a lot of kids do today. And so by the end of that summer, I was being chased by the police routinely, arrested, taken to detention center, you know, and they would pick me up, parents would take me home, and then as soon as they turned their back, I was back out the door. I already knew I didn't want to stay there. I was kind of hooked. So between the ages of 11 and 17, I probably spent about 5 or 6 of those years in some kind of foster home, detention center, group home, mental institution.
We'd like to talk about prison life. We need to take a short break, but
Okay.
We certainly want to get into the prison life and what turned your life around. So stay with us as Racine and Me continues. We are talking with a former gang member now working the streets of Racine to help other young people. Welcome back to Racine and Me here on Me TV. Our guest today is Sammy Rangel, who is the coordinator of Racine's Safe Streets Outreach Program. During the break, we were talking about your troubled life, and at 17, things got worse before they got better. Got worse meaning you went to prison. What happened there?
Well, I had 2 children born at the age of 17, my son and my daughter, but that didn't change anything. I was already so immersed in the gang life, the street life. I really didn't have any parental connection there yet. I went to prison for stealing a car, which is not typical for Illinois, Chicago area, but my juvenile history was so poor, it really reflected heavily with the judge. So he sent me to prison for 4 years as my first offense as an adult. I was supposed to do 8 months, and instead of doing 8 months in prison, I did 4.5 years. So I actually did longer than what I was sentenced for gang fights, batteries to officers while I was in prison. And that's really where I picked up a lot of the criminal mentality. You know, I went in, I think, like a street punk, and I came out like a hardcore criminal. No value for life. I didn't value freedom, didn't value my children yet.
There was no rehabilitation in prison for you?
No. In fact, I learned about corruption, racism. You know, the prisons in Illinois where I was at, I was in a place called Menard, which is a maximum prison, death row. You know, I got 4 years, and I'm in there with people with triple life, 40, 60, 80 years, trying to keep up with them. You know, and that's kind of how what we call made my bones, is kind of how I got my reputation, is how I got my rank, is how I got, you know, placed in the gang in a powerful position, was by the acting crazy in prison, you know, showing people I didn't care or value my life or my freedom. I get out, within 7 months, I'm on my way back to prison, this time in Wisconsin. I came to Wisconsin because I was on the run as soon as I got out of prison in Illinois. I got sentenced for 6 years for armed robberies, all gang-related behaviors, gang banging, even worse than I was, drinking worse than ever before. Judge sentenced me to 6. I was supposed to do 2 years. I ended up doing 7 years. Just repeat history. And in that time period, I spent probably about 4 years in solitary, 2-year stints both times, because I needed to be separated from the population because I was too aggressive, I was too violent, too dangerous. So they kept me isolated most of my prison stay.
And obviously, you were drawn to gangs. Mm-hmm. Gangs were drawn to you. What is the attraction for some young people who were isolated like you at a young age to become part of a family, a gang member?
Well, I think you touched on it right there. We have the common ground of being isolated. You know, a lot of us are lost. A lot of us are blind to solutions to the internal problems that are happening. And so there's kind of a comfort in huddling together. You know, we're all in this last-ditch effort to try to survive life, and that's our common ground. And when you have a desperate bond, it's really hard to engage or to separate people from that bond, because you've gotten through desperate times, lean times together. But then you start to change your mentality and say you're the only ones who really understand life. And so any outsiders trying to infiltrate that they're seen as a threat, because you're trying to tell me that my life, my way of living isn't good for me, but it's the life that I have, it's my life. So at some point when I decided to change, it was at the lowest point. I was in Waupun. I was in a paper gown. I was in what's called the greenhouse. They call it the greenhouse because nothing green grows there. I was doing my segregation bit, and this very unassuming man comes up and he knocks on my door.
An outsider.
Yeah, yeah.
The people that you tried to keep away.
The people I did keep away. And he says, hey, I'd like to tell you a story. And that was so weird, so out of place. It just really struck me as odd, because I was used to those guards and anybody else, treating me with a 10-foot pole. Nobody would get close to my door and talk to me. And so after a minute or two, I said, sure. So he pulls me out, I'm handcuffed, chained, got the shackles. They walk me to his office, and he asked them to take all of that off of me. And I hadn't been out of chains in years. I had been chained most of my life at this point. So when he asked them to take it off of me, it was another one of those weird moments for me. So he tells me this story, talks a little bit. I'm trying to shock him with my story. He's not being fazed. He's just listening. And that was kind of where the seed was planted. He kind of taught me that there was at least one other person in the world who didn't see me even the way I saw myself. And so it was a few years before I got it right, but that's where the seed was planted.
That was the turning point in your life, and eventually you were released from prison, and you moved to Kenosha for a while, and got hooked up with, Safe Haven?
Yeah, I was going to college while I was in prison. I was at KCC for a while. Jumped into change right away. It was college, NA meetings, volunteering. I was trying to jump into what I knew I wanted to do, which is work with young people, youth, in particularly at that time. Got hooked up with Maurice Horton from the gang crime program in Racine, who introduced me to Jim, who is the executive director for Safe Haven of Racine. And me and Jim became like a father to me. He became that mentor, that leader, that guide that I needed. I was shocked that anybody would give me a chance with my history, my record. In fact, when they interviewed me, I was like, I'm Sammy J. Rangel. And when they looked at me like they didn't know who I was kind of shocked. I'm like, no, wait a minute, I'm Sammy J. Rangel, you know, I'm that bad guy, I got that long, you know, and they're like, well, you know, things have changed, right? And yeah, and since then I've been with the agency, you know, going to school. I graduated with my bachelor's last year in May in social work. I'm now interning at Racine Psychological Services, pursuing my degree for master's in social work, you know, with a specialty in mental health disorders. And so I think that's going to make me more effective with the populations that I'm working with.
And you're also working with your wife, not only building a family, but also trying to build a better community in Racine. And we're going to invite her up next right after this break. Stay with us as this edition of Racine and Me continues.
You gotta move fast.
All this stuff around. Oh.
We just maybe talk about how long you've been married, your family, and then let's talk about how you work together.
Okay.
Safe Streets Outreach Program. What do you do? What's it about? What do you do? And feel free just to, you know.
Oh,
Talk.
okay. Can you hear me?
Just say 1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4. Oh,
Don't
good.
touch it, don't touch
Oh, sorry. Like a random.
Excellent.
How long have we been married? 2002?
2002. I say longer.
7 years? It'll be 7 years in March.
Welcome back to Racine and Me. We're talking about the Racine Safe Streets Outreach Program, and our coordinator is Sammy Rangel. We've talked about, Sammy, your background, your life with gangs, and your time in prison, and how you're able to escape that lifestyle. And joining us now is Sammy's wife, Denise Rangel, who is not only his partner in marriage, but also in this program. Welcome, and Denise, let's talk about the Safe Streets Outreach Program, and how does it work, and who does it help?
Well, with Safe Streets, right currently, Sammy he does the programming, but I'm doing girls groups. And what I do right now, I'm going into the schools and I talk to girls during their lunch hour that the teachers select, and we have lunch and we talk about different issues, whatever the issue may be. It might be, you know, we're talking back in class, we're having problems on the playground, but, you know, different issues, and it's really up to what they want to do right there. It's just more or less, I'm the extra ear that the teacher doesn't have time because she needs to attend to lessons. So I get to talk to the girls, ask them, you know, the questions of, you know, what kind of ladies they want to be in the future, and kind of, you know, talk to their future selves.
When you talk about guys and gangs, you know, groups of guys together, gangs, girls, you usually refer to it as cliques, and cliques can be pretty damaging as well to a young lady. And tell me about what you're doing to help young women, you know, build some kind of self-esteem and independence.
Well, I let them know that they have a choice in whatever decisions they make. Right now we have our teenagers that we talk to, and we've come to the realization that they're going to do what they're going to do. It's more or less parents and the people that are surrounding them is to let them, you know, be themselves, but at least know who they're going to be, who do they want to be. And, you know, whatever negative or positive behaviors that they have, you know, direct them towards there. I mean, they're individuals. And I think us as adults sometimes want to just control them, and we have to they have the control. I mean, they have every ability that they have, we've given it to them, those tools. So for us to be kind of hindering them to not, you know, be independent, not think for themselves, you know, it's kind of like a handicap. So what I do with the girls is more or less, you know, if they tell me, you know, I like this boy, I'm like, well, what do you like about this boy? And get past that superficial views of, oh, he looks look cute on the outside. Great, he's cute on the outside, but you know that goes. And they're kind of like, oh, it does. I was like, so it's just kind of, you know, what they're saying, and you just kind of direct it back at them and makes them think, because most of the time I think what we do as adults is we think for them.
Sure.
And then we undermine what they can actually do. So we just throw it back at them, and they're just kind of like, she's not telling me not to date this guy. I'm like,
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean,
I let your parents do that.
Sure.
I'm just here to listen.
Sometimes you're dealing with those kinds of issues. Other times, Sammy, you're dealing with some hardcore issues of life and death. Tell me about some of your experiences with young people in Racine.
Well, you name it. We've dealt with co-workers' sons being murdered, you know, due to gang violence, cousins. You know, we're dealing with a lot of death in Racine. We deal with violence. You know, Denise didn't tell you, but, you know, she's broken up gang fights between girls. You know, I've been caught in the crossfire out there. It's dangerous work that we're doing. You know, it's the real nature of the program is to help children transition out of unsafe environments, to help prevent sexual exploitation. And a lot of the kids that we're working with are being sexually exploited by other youth and by other adults. Kind of like what I was saying in my childhood. You know, young kids are exchanging sex for food, money, transportation, clothes, acceptance. We're trying to get in that, and so we view the gangs as a natural part of that thing that we're trying to interrupt, because like I was saying, a lot of the times young people are joining that not so much for survival for food, but survival to fit in, to have an identity. You know, and in a time like this, it's kind of hard to find out who you are when you're trying to compete with so many different messages. And so our face is a common face out there now. We're trusted by that community. You know, we still have those kids that don't trust us, but as a whole, there's not a community in Racine that we really can't get into and somebody say, no, this guy is okay, this, you know, Denise is okay, they want to help, you know, because they'll associate us with the police or the government, and that's not our role. Our role is to do crisis intervention, help young people transition out of that lifestyle. So I've now seen young people over those, you know, last 9 or 10 years actually transition from gang life to responsible life.
You've seen a number of success stories?
Yes. There's one young lady I can think of in particular. I met her when she was around 12 years old, had been on the street already a number of years, abandoned by her family. Now she's responsible, has an apartment. She had twins that passed away in her arms. And even with that, she continued to move forward. You know, there are other stories where, you know, people still come and see us, and they'll see us and they'll stop and say, hey, I want to thank you. You really helped turn my life around. You know, I'm going into the service today. You know, like that young boy walking past our house, or standing in for our own prenatal visits with the doctor, and there's a young woman there, a teenager, saying, is that Sammy? You know, oh, I remember when he came to our school and he talked to me, you know, and, you know, I'm doing better now, you know. And so you do see those success stories. But the ones I think that stay with you also are the ones where those young people aren't alive anymore, or they're not with us anymore, or they're in prison for long sentences. But at the same time, you know, we understand we can only do so much with our efforts. You know, you can't change unless you want to change.
And you offer more than a message. What other alternatives can you say? Okay, you're there at the street level offering these ideas and messages, but what else can you provide these young people, kinds of alternatives to troubled lives?
I guess we deal with them wherever they're at that moment. There's no easy fix for anything. So if at that moment the only thing they need is for somebody, you know, to provide, you know, condoms or something, you know, that's as much as we can do at that point. If there's, you know, they just want to call, or they just need that number, you know, I'm here, can you come pick me up? You know, that's something that we can offer. But it's wherever they're at.
We also offer alternative shelter. We have the shelter at Safe Haven. So young people actually have a place they can go stay, sleep, feed, bathe, talk at the shelter for up to 2 weeks, and sometimes up to 4 weeks, you know, where they can get in there and get the help that they need. But we also offer like the bully prevention stuff. You know, we have the beef hotline, where we escort young people to and from school if they feel like they're in danger. We've walked kids from class to class. We go into their homes, we take food with us, we take clothes with us. For the holidays, we're giving people baskets, and we're making sure there's toys under the tree. So we do offer some respite, in a sense, some relief, some temporary relief, hoping that that's enough to help them transition. How
to turn mean streets into safe streets in Racine. That's what we're talking about this morning. We'll be right back with Sammy and Denise Rangel when Racine and Me continues. Welcome back, our guests today, Sammy and Denise Rangel. Sammy, you've lived two lives in a sense. The first 30 years on the streets, in prison, and the last 11 or so, your father, your husband, and you are also working to make your community as best as it can be. Let's talk about family life.
Well, my family life consists of that man who helped me into prison. We still talk to this day.
An anonymous man?
Yeah. Well, his name is George.
George.
Yeah, George
Okay.
is my uncle.
Okay.
He is the beginning of this process for me. I have a huge extended family. Not much of my real family is involved. You know, I'm starting to develop relationships with my niece and my nephew, my own children, my son, the children me and Denise have in our home. That's really become the spiritual light for me. You know, when I do this work, it's with full knowledge that I'm helping my own family as well. And so in that sense, I think my number one job is being a husband and being a father.
We have 30 seconds left. Denise, your goals for Safe Streets outreach in Racine?
Safe Streets, we want to have, you know, a safer community. We want the people that need the help to be able to get the help, and then the people that can help to be able to get involved with community agencies in their community so that they can help, so that they can, you know, do that extended hand. You know, everybody has a talent, and if they actually went and put their talent to use, you know, don't think that your talent is too small to help. So I guess that's what I would like for everybody to put their talents.
How to reach Safe Streets?
You can get on our website, www.safehavenofracine.org. We're on there. You can see our program, our brochures.
Sammy and Denise, thanks.
Thank you.
Racine and Me, furniture and set decoration provided by Steinhoffels.